Yan ulit. Anya sa'yo, Kansamida. Thank you very much again for joining us. Again, sabi ko, pag-usapan natin yan. Sabi ko, hindi ko pwedeng tulugan ito dahil ang nangyari over the past hours ay malaking implication ito for all of us across the world, especially for democracies. Democracies in trouble. So as you may know, katulad ng pinost natin kanina po, eto na, may martial law na po sa South Korea. Obviously, may mga nuances yan because there are different forms of martial law. May levels pa yan ng martial law. We can talk about the nuances and intricacies shortly. But before that, let me just say bakit mahalaga ito sa atin. Ang South Korea po of course, on a personal level, malapit sa puso natin. Tayo po throughout the years have repeatedly visited not only South Korea but also North Korea. And not to mention, of course, personally, of course, I was also trained by South Koreans all the way to my black belt in Taekwondo. Malapit, in short, ang South Korea sa ating puso on so many levels throughout the years. And as a Baguio boy, we have had many South Korean friends. We have had, many people of South Korean background. We had, pinag-aralan po natin. I'm a big fan of South Korean. Not yung mga K-pop, mga ganun, but I'm a big fan of South Koreans' economic story, dynamism, a big fan of their their economic success and dynamo. As I said, hindi lang tayo South Korea, nag-North Korea din tayo. Ito yung picture natin sa North Korea. So, yan, Kim Jong-il and Kim Il-sung, right? Yung father ni Kim Jong-un and then yung grandfather ni Kim Jong-un ang doon makita natin dito sa picture na yan. So, this is a country that has been very close to our heart. And by the way, these two will be related to each other because as we will discuss shortly dito sa declaration of martial law in South Korea by President Yoon, may kinalaman din ito sa North Korea, right? So as someone who has been to both South Korea to North Korea, looking at the evolution of the conflict in that area, the frozen conflict in the area, at saka yung epekto nito sa domestic politics dyan sa South Korea, let me just tell you na para sa akin mahalaga talaga yung nangyari dyan and we have to pay very close attention. So now, officially na po, actually nung una sabi ko parang fake news yata to eh. So I really had to double check, triple check, look at some of the professor and academic friends na meron tayo sa South Korea. And then when I saw my friends, my editor in Nikkei Asia in Tokyo, my friends na professors sa South Korea, nag-post, nag-live feed sila about that, then na-confirm po natin. And then I realized also it was just a few minutes into the breaking news announcement by major outlets around the world and also in the Philippines, guys. So, eto na talaga, marami pong nangyari dito sa South Korea and let me discuss why this is important. But before going there, unang-una pag-usapan natin, ano po yung konteksto ng martial law sa South Korea. So let me just pull out the important part of speech by President Yoon just to give you an idea of how he tried to justify this. So as you may know, just as background, South Korea is a very ferocious two-party system, right? So katulad ng US two-party system din sila, but way ahead of the United States. Way ahead of the United States po. Nakipagsapakan na yung mga tao sa South Korea. So if you look at it around the world, dalawa sa pinaka-notorious na mga parliamentary fights, literally fights, suntukan, isa yung sa Taiwan at isa po sa South Korea. At there's a lot of reasons why itong mga Northeast Asian brothers natin ay napaka passionate sa kanilang politika. Of course, that's a legacy of how these countries have been victims of frozen wars, whether it's the Taiwan-China cross-strait conflict or it's the Korean Peninsula conflict. So unfortunately, medyo traumatized itong mga bansa na ito and we see na even if nag-transition na sila sa democracy, in fact, Taiwan and South Korea transitioned to democracy almost back-to-back from the late 1980s on Taiwan and almost mid-1980s on South Korea. So tayo, South Korea, Taiwan, lahat tayo nag-back-to-back transition into democracy. I'll talk about very shortly kasi kanina may nagsabi kanina na eto na ang South Korea ay learning from the Philippines, but actually no, they don't have to learn from the Philippines. We have to learn from what's happening in South Korea dahil ang South Korea also had a dictatorship back in the day and now they're back unfortunately into a very very dangerous situation. Hindi ko masabi na necessarily guys na ang nangyari sa South Korea ay full-fledged martial law. There are nuances to that, and I'm more than happy to share it as soon as more nuanced legal analysis comes in. Pero basahin po natin itong speech ni President Yoon, right? President Yoon, who declared martial law in South Korea, one of the most prosperous, developed and looked upon, no, admirable nations out there. But unfortunately right now nakita natin even a country as developed as South Korea, even a democracy as passionate, or precisely because it's such a passionate democracy, nakita natin na could be very vulnerable, very very vulnerable to essentially, some would say, usurpation of power, or some would say authoritarian usurpation, or some would say democratic backsliding. Although I'm very very conscious na nakita ko sa mga comment section ng mga others, marami din sumusuporta kay President Yoon kasing sawang-sawa na sila doon sa opposition. But so this is the speech by President Yoon Suk Yeol, who by the way I watched live in South Korea in Seoul during the Asian Leadership Forum. I was invited there. I gave 2 talks there. Ito rin yung forum na inattend ni Vice President Lenin Robredo last year. So dun sa Asian Leadership Forum, I had a couple of talks there. The keynote speaker during that event was Zelensky of Ukraine, along with Prime Minister of Mahathir, and then of course the guy who opened the event was President Yoon. So I've seen him in person. Not that I met him and talked to him, but I've seen him in person. I watched him in person early on, and he always got my attention because alam natin yung background ni Yoon, diba? He used to be a prosecutor, straight into politics siya right away, and of course he shot to stardom. He shot to stardom, guys, after leading yung prosecution ng anak ng dating diktador na si Park Chung-hee, na si Park Geun-hye, right? So if you remember back in 2016, big time po ang mga protesta sa South Korea dahil doon sa alleged corruption na nangyari under former President Park Geun-hye, na anak, no, yung tanging anak, daughter ng former dictator Park Chung-hee. So Yoon was known really as a complete outsider, very populist, very style Trump of Asia yung tawag sa kanya. Medyo right-wing, to be honest, very conservative, medyo Manenism, medyo anti-woke, if I can put it that way. So a lot of elements you see in the Trumps and Orbans of this world was already with this guy. And as I said, he was a top prosecutor, and he was a lawyer who had to work his way up. I think he didn't even pass his first bar, if I'm not mistaken, or nahirapan siya or something like that. So this is a guy who really had to, pick himself up by the bootstraps and work his way up the prosecutor's world, and then eventually get involved in the big case against President Park Geun-hye, and then he makes his name, and then he runs after President Moon Jae-in, right? And then he becomes the president and immediately goes for all sorts of really decisive transformations that further exacerbated yung mga tensions and yung two-party polarization na nakita natin sa South Korea, which in my opinion is probably even worse than what we see in the United States. So may kinalaman ito. Yung issue ng sinasabi nilang Samsung, may kinalaman yung Samsung issue doon sa prosecution of former President Park Geun-hye, kasi ang allegation is that yung alalay nung President Park Geun-hye na parang shaman, whatever, I involve, in like kind of colluding and passing notes, whatever, dun sa heir ng the Samsung family, no, nung pinakamalaking oligarch ng South Korea. But of course, that's a good thing in South Korea. Even their oligarchs create good jobs, create good industries, are world leaders. Hindi katulad ng mga oligarchs natin na airport pa lang ay tumataas lang presyo pero bumababa yung kalidad. I don't know what the hell is going on. But they have relatively good oligarchs compared to us. World-class companies. But nevertheless, we know corruption, collusion, schmoozing, unfortunately, has been a story in South Korea. And over again, multiple presidents in South Korean history went to jail. Some of them committed suicide. So I can go back to Moon Bak also, President Moon Bak before President Park Geun-hye. So on and on and on. This is a country with a lot of corruption scandals, with a lot of presidents going down due to corruption scandals, or a lot of presidents who stepped down are facing corruption scandals, including President Moon Jae-in, who's known as a kind of a progressive liberal, or some would say very leftist wokey leader. So mahabang usapan yan. But going back to this speech, so I now just gave you an idea, slight idea about the person we're talking to. So medyo, imagine a digong na medyo mas maayos tignan, medyo mas maayos magsalita, medyo mas bata, Kasi prosecutor din si Digong back in the day, di ba? At someone who shot up to politics right away. Hindi na siya dumaan sa lower levels of governance, no? So ito po yung speech ni President Yoon Suk-yeol kanina. He declared kanina lang, I am proclaiming martial law to protect the Republic of Korea from the threat of North Korea's communist forces, to eradicate anti-state forces that shamelessly align with pro-North elements and plunder the freedom and happiness of our citizens, and to safeguard the constitutional order of freedom. I mean, these are the kinds of speeches you used to read about what was happening in the 60s and 70s when all sorts of military dictatorship and governments took over. So dun sa emergency briefing niya kanina lang sa Yongsan Presidential Office, sinabi ni Yoon, through martial law, we will rebuild and defend the Free Republic of Korea, which is on the verge of national ruin. So very Trumpian, national ruin. Very Trump, very Duterte. Wala na, ako na yung last card nyo. Very, very populist. You know, we need to defend the freedom. Whenever you hear a president keeps on saying freedom and then talks about martial law, alam na natin this. So, eto, para kay President Yoon, ito yung talagang nag-trigger daw sa kanya. Alright? Ito yung talagang nag-trigger sa kanya. To date, the National Assembly has initiated 22 impeachment motions against government officials since the inauguration of our administration. And since the 22nd National Assembly convened this June, it has been pursuing impeachment against 10 additional individuals. So, yeah. Nag-trigger sa kanya is yung gridlock. Ang trigger sa kanya is yung pushback from the opposition because unlike sa Pilipinas po, may totoo po yung mga party systems dyan. So, even if Yoon was able to win the presidency, the executive branch, the opposition, liberal leftist party was able to hold on to the parliament. And I've been also in the parliament of South Korea. So dun sa parliament nila talaga, hiwalay talaga. I mean, their seats are arranged on this side. Talagang nakahiwalay yung dalawang partido kasi baka magsuntukan pa sila and all of that, diba? So, you know, so galit na galit si si President Yoon dito sa mga sa tingin niya ay sabotahe, sa tingin niya ay unfair treatment, sa tingin niya yung torpedoing of his administration and preventing him from fulfilling his duty as the president of South Korea. No? So this para sa kanya, because this is an unprecedented situation, right? Because sa tingin niya masyado ng pasaway na itong legislature na yan, this is an unprecedented situation in the history of any country in the world and the history of our nation's founding. It's like, I'm not sure about that. We can talk a lot about what has been happening in South Korea throughout the decades. Talagang magulang South Korea. Just to give you an idea, I'm sure you can check it on your own, but I mean, South Korea is notorious for having really, very, very pugnacious, I would say, very polarized, very, sometimes even violent. So I don't know how President Yoon could say this is the first time, just to give you an idea, right? Just to give you an idea, just the other month, no, na sinaksak pa yung leader of opposition. So this country and ito naman, this is like scoff. This is from 10 years. This is from 10 years ago. Almost. So I mean, you can check the news and all. Yan, yun ang sinasabi ng parliament. Hiwalay. Suntukan na yan. Sige lang. Yan. Talagang intense sila, pare. Intense sila. Magsusuntukan talaga sila. Ganun ang politics sa South Korea, guys. Ganun ang mangyari kung may prinsipyo yung mga politiko. Talagang makipagsapakan yan para sa prinsipyo. Yun o, tingnan nyo, talagang minekos-mekos na nila yan. Yeah, so these are just one of the scenes. I mean, this has been going on for quite some time. Sabi ko nga, yung isang month naman, sinaksak yung leader of opposition. So this is a very, very tense. This is naman from 13 years ago. Kung isa... Tingnan mo, nilagay pa ng, gas, talagang... Ayan, tingnan, grabe, Ganun ang parliament nila, talagang rally, parang na-rallista. 'Di ba? So, this is a very, very tense. This is naman from 13 years ago. Kung isa... Tingnan mo, nilagay pa ng, gas, talagang... Ayan, tingnan, grabe, Ganun ang parliament nila, talagang rally, parang na-rallista. 'Di ba? So, this is a very, very tense. This is naman from 13 years ago. Kung isa... Tingnan mo, nilagay pa ng, Ayan na. Sige lang. Sige lang. Yun. O yun, no? Sige lang. Look at it, guys. Grabe sila, oh. So, I'm telling you guys, talagang intense ang politics sa South Korea. Yun naman yung downside kung masyadong clear yung party lines and masyadong polarized and masyadong paniwala naman yung mga politiko sa kanilang mga panindigan. So, yun naman yung other side of the story. Kung masyadong maraming panindigan, masyadong na. As I said, yes, if you go to Taiwan, ibang klase din yung Taiwan. Actually, very similar yung dalawa na yan. Anyway, going back to this, so this is where I'm like, I'm not sure it's unprecedented itong gridlock. And hindi katulad ng Pilipinas. I mean, look at BBM. Ano bang party ni BBM? Federalista Party. Ilan bang federalista nakapasok sa Congress? Pero biglang lahat BBM party. Ganon din. Sa Pilipinas, walang real political party. Defection kaagad sa lahat ng sa presidente right off the bat. No, with slight exception during Arroyo. We can have a long conversation about that. Ito para kay President Yoon, sabi niya, referring to the opposition, they have paralyzed judicial operations by intimidating judges and impeaching a large number of prosecutors. Of course, he's referring to his former colleagues in the judiciary, with whom he seems to have a lot of solidarity. They have also attempted to impeach the Minister of the Interior Safety, the Chairman of Korea Communications Commission, the Chairman of the Board of Audit and Inspection, and the Minister of National Defense. Ito yung importante, yung National Defense, thereby crippling the executive branch. Moreover, they have entirely slashed essential budgets related to the state's core functions, drug crime crackdowns, similar to Digong, very strong din yung stance ni Yoon sa drug issue, and public safety, reducing the nation to a state of chaos marked by rampant drug crimes and a public security crisis. So medyo maladigong din ito dito. Siya rin. So, ang kalaban kasi niya is the Democratic Party. Sa kanya, the Democratic Party ng opposition has cut 1 trillion won. So, that's around what? 300 billion pesos? From disaster preparedness reserves, 38.4 billion won. From childcare support allowances, 41.1 trillion won. 4.1 trillion won from youth unemployment and offshore gas field development projects in the next year's budget. So, we're talking about billions of dollars being slashed here, potentially tens of billions. They have even hindered increases in pay and allowances for junior military officers and improvements in their working conditions. Such budget tyranny is nothing short of mockery of public finances. So he speaks very much like a prosecutor, and that's how he's litigating his case. But importantly, nakita nyo, balik siya ng balik sa issue ng national defense, national security. Ano epekto ito sa mga military, among other things. He want to also say, he accused the Democratic Party of instituting what he calls, quote, legislative dictatorship, which uses even the national budget as a tool for political strife, which has led to budget impeachments without hesitation. Governance is paralyzed and the sighs of the people grow louder. This is an overt anti-state act that tramples on the constitutional order of the Republic of Korea and disrupts legitimate state institutions established by the constitutional law, amounting to a clear conspiracy to incite rebellion. Essentially, is accusing them of sedition aside from undermining the state. The people's livelihood are being ignored with impeachment, special investigations, and shielding the opposition leader taking precedence, leaving governance in a state of paralysis. So it keeps on saying about paralysis, the state cannot work, pasaway, undermining the state. Our National Assembly has become a haven for criminal groups. So now he's openly even accusing the opposition of being criminal groups, disrupting the judicial and administrative system of the state and plotting the overthrow of the liberal democratic system. He further stated, the National Assembly, which should serve as a foundation of liberal democracy, has turned into a monster undermining that very system. The Republic of Korea is currently in a precious state, as if standing on the edge of a cliff where collapse could occur at any time. So again, very similar kay Trump na kung hindi ako binoto, it's end of America, all the illegals, criminals are gonna come in, I don't know, terrorists are gonna attack, or like Digong, pag di niyo ako binoto, end of the world na, narco state na tayo. So again, you can really see this echoes right-wing populism, using public security, using law and order as a basis for either usurpation of power, some would say, or at least curbing of existing constitutional freedoms. No, I will. So dito medyo nakakatakot na yung language na, which I think we have to really look at. So this is the part na I really find very chilling kanina. I mean, you could see now, this is South Korea, guys. I know it's not a perfect democracy. I know that many crazy stuff has been happening in that country, but guys, this is big deal. If South Korea can do this, my goodness, right? If South Korea can do this, I mean, imagine everything he has been saying. Parang ang dali mag-isip na parang meron din tayong ganyan, parang meron din ganyan sa US, Ito. I will eliminate, parang digong, I will eliminate anti-state forces, and normalize the nation as quickly as possible. Baka may 6 months din siyang deadline. Although the martial law declaration may cause significant inconvenience, ito pa, isa pang very familiar word sa atin yan, to law-abiding citizens, ibig sabihin, kung wala ka naman problema dahil wala ka rin issue, right, who trust in the constitutional values of the Republic of Korea, we will focus on minimizing these inconveniences. This measure is unavoidable for the continuity of the free Republic of Korea. It does not alter our foreign policy principle of fulfilling responsibility and contributions in the international community. So this is his way of signaling to US, to Europe, and other partners na huwag kayong makialam, okay pa tayo, we'll stick to status quo. We're gonna, President Yoon just called Trump the other day. They had a fantastic conversation. He's looking forward to working with him. Let's not forget, papunta na rin elections in South Korea, so I wonder also what are the implications here. This measure is unavoidable for the continuity of the Free Republic. Unavoidable law yan. As President, I earnestly appeal to the people. I trust only you, meaning not the constitutional institutions, not the legislature, not as things stand. Only you I trust, the citizens, and I will dedicate myself entirely to protecting the Free Republic of Korea. Parang ala Tatay Digong na I will die for Philippines, I will sacrifice myself for my country and people, yung mga ganon. Tapos, I only trust the people. So this is a complete attack not only on opposition, but somehow a complete attack on existing democratic institutions. So, for me, very chilling yan. Very, very chilling ito, guys. This is happening, again, in one of the most prosperous and arguably successful democracies in the world. As I said, yes, hindi tayo nagbubulag-bulagan doon sa mga gulo sa South Korea. We just mentioned a while ago that South Korea is notorious, or some would say famous, right, for its very contentious and dramatic politics. But if South Korea can go down this line, the implications are stark, right? Now, do I think that this means BBM will also have martial law? No, I don't think so. And let's just get the facts clear here. South Korea does not need to learn from the Marcos legacy because they have always had their own version of this. In fact, they had their own OG of dictatorship, and that was their former strongman Park Chung-hee, right? And if you look at Park Chung-hee, back in the day, Park Chung-hee actually even visited the Philippines. So I'm just going to show you a picture here of Park Chung-hee. So that's Park Chung-hee, the former dictator. Actually, medyo kamukha rin siya ni Marcos. So may similarity siya. Para mas payat lang, medyo mas K-pop-ish. Pero he could pass as an Ilocano to me, to be honest. He has this kind of this is a picture of Imelda Marcos, President Johnson, Lyndon Johnson, and President Park Chung-hee in Malacanang. So you can see the picture there. So we used to be very close ally together with South Korea, and we were together with the Americans. We were withstanding communist forces. So actually, yung isa dahilan na nagkaroon ng dictatorship sa maraming bansa, from Latin America to Philippines among others, but most especially in South Korea, was to defeat or to resist, right? Or at the very least manage yung frozen conflict nila with communist, Soviet, Maoist-backed North Korea. So they don't have to learn anything from us. The big difference, though, that Park Chung-hee had with our dictator is that he was a competent dictator in terms of building the foundations of what we know now as Korea economically. So lahat ng mga Samsung, yung mga chaebols na yan, a lot of them used to be very similar to our oligarchs. Back in the day, you can Google it yourself, Korea was exporting hair, toothbrush, I don't know, whatever. Tapos yung mga oligarchs nila, mga landed elite, very similar to ours. Oligarchic na sobrang backward feudalistic. Park Chung-hee because he served in the Japanese Imperial Army, because he studied the case of Japan and how Japan was able to progress from a backward feudalistic society during the Tokugawa era, and thanks to the Meiji Restoration, it was able to transform into a modern industrial state. He learned the lessons from other late developing countries like Germany, and then Japan from Germany, and then he applied it to South Korea. So he was very competent in creating industrial policy, and he bullied. This is something, sometimes you're like, sometimes dictators can also do good things. Unfortunately, we never had those kind of dictators, right? One of the good things that Park Chung-hee did was he bullied the chaebols to get into manufacturing, and he bullied them into doing the manufacturing as good as possible. And in exchange, he provided them subsidies. So nung una, there were like 200 oligarchic families, right? And eventually it went down and down and down until there were 5 to 10 left, including Daewoo back in the day, who were the most competent of the most competent. Meaning, ito yung mga tycoons, ito yung mga cronies who actually were very effective in exporting and all of that. So that's what you call in economics the reciprocal mechanisms. Meaning, I give you subsidy and support, you give me world-class exports by every 5 years, The founders of LG, for instance, initially said they don't want to do a manufacturing, wala silang alam. Park Chung-hee threatened them like, tingnan natin, immediately within a short period, LG's founders teamed up with a German company, and the next thing you know is history. LG becoming one of the biggest electronics company in the world. So actually, in the case of Park Chung-hee, he was a competent dictator who forced and scared, right, the oligarchs in the country to get into world-class industries, and the rest of history. So we can see that. So yun yung wala tayo during Marcos, because in the case of Marcos, it was more like, kronika, you'll get whatever money kahit incompetent ka. Like, how many world-class industries did Marcos create? Where's our Samsung, Hyundai, LG, Kia, even Daewoo? I can go on. Wala. He had 20 years. So anyway, what I'm saying here is that Korea has nothing to learn from the Philippines. It has, unfortunately, its own history of dictatorship, including Park Chung-hee, whose daughter was the president a few years ago and who was actually ousted by no less than President Yoon, who right now is declaring a martial law. Speaking of martial law, balikan natin ulit yan. Why is this worrying, right? It's worrying on multiple levels. Now, first of all, of course, ma-piss off na naman yung mga ka-Trumpers natin dyan, yung mga medyo hindi nagbabasa ng masyado ng mga pangyayari sa mundo. Actually, some people are wondering if Trump will do something similar, if the Democrats try to resist his policies, probably on immigration policies. Among other things, he has already threatened, and he did threaten in the past, to send the National Guard into some of the cities when you had all of the Black Lives Matter protests. You don't believe me? Talk to the top American generals. Almost all of them are critics of Trump because they saw the worst of worst when they work for him. But mahabang usapan yan. No, but anong paki natin dito sa Pilipinas? For me, the first lesson here is that if a country as developed, if a country as progressive, as sophisticated as South Korea, if a country as important as South Korea, where the U.S. has military bases, which has massive trade and relations with all countries, if this country can fall like that because the president is frustrated and all with the gridlock in the legislature, and then good luck sa atin, right? Pangalawa, if you look at it, Yoon was able to use as a pretext, some would say weaponize, the North Korean threat. I'm yet to see the evidence that talaga the Democratic Party was colluding with North Korea, to use national security and geopolitical tensions as a basis for suspension of constitutional rights. Sa akin, and of course the Philippines, who knows, maybe if, Duterte did that to a certain degree by using the war on drugs as an excuse, right? But let's not forget, actually under Duterte we came very close to having our own nationwide martial law. If you remember, not long after the Marawi crisis, right, you had Duterte openly warning, right, that all options are on the table. Look at the picture with Duterte surrounded by military, surrounded by all of his top advisors, Bongo also there. He threatened martial law. Luckily, he couldn't find enough excuse for nationwide martial law kasi wala siyang mapakita na ebidensya na talaga ISIS could attack the rest of the country. This, God forbid, that didn't happen. Thank God it didn't happen. But importantly, what happened in the Philippines is that the military did not agree with him. So had Lorenzana or Anyo of the AFP agreed with Digong to go for martial law, wala yan. Game over na tayo ng 2017 pa rin. So I think we have to be very thankful to AFP for holding the line. We were very close to having our own martial law in the Philippines. Now, luckily, we didn't get it under Duterte. I very much doubt that we'll get it under BBM, but who knows, right? If things go very crazy. I mean, look at what Yoon is doing in a country like South Korea when he's facing a gridlock and impeachment complaints. Now, imagine, in the case of the Philippines, you have a situation whereby the vice president and some other elements are openly talking about his assassination, among other things. But I don't know. I just don't sense it's Marcos thing. And if anything, because of this thing happening in South Korea, baka maging more defensive pa si Marcos. But I'll tell you one thing, guys. Huwag kayong ma-surprise if Sara comes back to power. Okay, so if Sara Duterte comes back to power and all of that, my goodness, kung nag-resist yung iba or something happened, baka hindi pa kanya hintayin eh. Sabi niya, after everything that has been done to her, don't be surprised if Sara Duterte will say, eto na, kailangan natin ng martial law or anything like that. I'm just telling you guys, who knows, baka si Basta talagang gawin nilang Department of National Defense. I'm just telling you guys, if this can happen in South Korea, my goodness, it can happen in any democracy. Especially a democracy as fragile as ours, and yes, as polarized as America, right? We luckily avoided a nationwide martial law under Digong. I cannot guarantee the same thing if the Dutertes come back. I cannot even guarantee it under the current circumstances. It's just that, let's just say we're quote-unquote lucky that BBM doesn't seem to be in the mold, right? In fact, the fact that he's Ferdinand Marcos Jr. perhaps will make him think twice. But if Sara Duterte comes back with vengeance, which will absolutely be the case, good luck sa atin lahat. Yun lang masasabi ko. Kaya watch very carefully what's happening in South Korea. Watch very carefully how specific provisions of the constitutions were easily weaponized to declare martial law. Watch very carefully what happens next in South Korea. What will be the response from incoming Trump administration? What will be the response from other major democracies? Because that can give you an idea about what can other people learn from this situation. More importantly, what can they learn about what they can get away with, right? So, yun lang sinasabi ko. That's why I pay attention to what's happening all around the world, especially in our neighborhood, especially guys pag ang usapan dito guys is democracies facing trouble. So wala akong pake kung anong background nyo, whatever, but if you're not well informed about what's happening all around the world, huwag kayong magmaganda, makinig lang kayo sa akin, because I'm doing my best here in order to have a comparative analysis here, and I'm doing my best here to tell you guys, don't wait for disaster to happen in the Philippines before we prepare ourselves or do what is necessary. So let me end on this note kasi gabi na. First of all, siguro kailangan natin magpasalamat na we didn't get a version of a Marcos that would have walked down this path. But who knows, right? Pangalawa, let's not forget that God forbid something happens to Marcos Jr., either Marcos Jr. can declare it, assuming natin, there's a really assassination attempt, he survives it, who knows, right? Baka he declares martial. But more importantly, if Duterte's come back, I won't really be surprised if they declare martial law or really go all the way. And tapos ng usapan, right? Again, will it happen? Of course, no one knows for sure. But what I'm saying is that it can happen. And it can happen very easily. Very, very easily. Because unlike South Korea, we have way weaker institutions. Way weaker institutions. We have no real political parties. And unlike South Korea, let's be honest, have you seen protests in South Korea? I flew back from New York when Trump won. A few days, dumaan ako sa Seoul. My goodness, grabing protests sa South Korea. Every time I pass through the presidential palace area, there's massive protests there. South Korea is the capital of protest. Now, imagine how easy it is to declare martial law when hindi lang wala kang totoong mga principled na politiko to hold the line. When also, let's be honest, with the exception of yes, marami lumabas dun sa pink movement nung election time. Pero after that, kamusta? Or tingnan natin, gaano kalaki yung mga protesta laban kay Digong back in the day, right? I'm just saying we're so vulnerable, God forbid, if the wrong person ends up on top of Malacanang, or whether we have that person already, it's so easy to weaponize things and use any gridlock, any systematic opposition as a basis to invoke martial law. On that note, let me stop because I don't want to say more. We're going to wait for more updates. Let's see what will be the reaction from the rest of South Korea international community. I'm sure that President Marcos Jr. will say something along the lines that, we value democracy, etc. And that's why we have to value this, blah, blah, blah. I won't be surprised. But let's see, guys. And if ever Trump does something crazy, don't go on and blame me. Okay, I already told you guys. What's happening in South Korea is going to be a test case for what could happen in the most developed, prosperous, and advanced democracies on earth. Yun lang masasabi ko dyan. On that note, thank you very much. God bless. Please continue to support us on Spotify and different channels. And tuloy-tuloy natin itong discussion natin. Tomorrow will be, God willing, with Justice Carpio. Pag-usapan natin impeachment against Sara. Pag-usapan din natin what can we learn from the martial law declaration perhaps in South Korea. Salamat. God bless. And